Good day and welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. I'm your host, Rhyland. I'm going to dive into a solo episode here, answering questions from Instagram. And I got a bunch. I got at least a dozen here, but it's really cool how they kind of flow together. Where we're going to talk a lot about how people need to start out. Some of these really big mistakes people make off the bat. Had some great questions around like, what would you recommend to start out with working out, especially for, say, you're 60 years old. So on top of that, what about picky eaters? So really good ideas here that I want to express. And then, just some fun, different stories and stuff that people wanted to hear about. So I'm going to dive into this. And there's going to be a lot of stuff here where you could even take some notes, and you could probably learn a fair bit from this because I think they kind of flow into each other very well as far as, especially what advice do people starting out really need. And that's a big part of the theme here from just how the questions are flowing out. And then there's also just some basically some misconceptions around some different things that we can clear up here. So I'm going to dive into this. So the very first one that I want to start off with, because it kind of goes into, where do people start? And someone asked, is the best form of training for a 60-year-old who doesn't currently work out? And this one hits close to home because my mom is in this kind of general population. But, even regardless of age, if someone's trying to work out for the first time, the thing I would look at that 60-year-old would be in relationship to also people who are maybe very overweight and younger. Anyone who really has, physical impairments, it's going to make it a little bit, being older is going to make it you feel like less inclined to want to go to the gym. And if someone's very overweight and they're new at training, they're probably not going to want to go to the gym. So this is a good kind of idea for a lot of people to pay attention to. And what is the best form of training? Oh, I got a great exercise for you. This is the best exercise for general health, and it's not strength training, believe it or not, it's walking. If someone is hesitant or isn't training and needs to get a routine, there is not a bigger, easier, lower barrier to entry that has the most benefits for them compared to walking. It is so simple and cost effective. Go outside for a walk every day. It is, I underestimated how impactful this is, but that is where you got to start. If someone says, I got to start getting in shape, start with walking. Start walking once a day. It just intentionally walking is something that can cause its own limitation. But the irony here is people think it won't be impactful, but the thing is it's super impactful. And if you look at the research, people who have 10K steps a day, there's like this huge kind of like big drop off or improvement, I should say, on mortality. And you'll see it in a blog. If you ever check out my blogs, I talk about the impact of walking, and there's a chart in there where mortality rate, basically like people dying sooner when they only have 6,000 steps. 8,000 is a little bit better, and then 10,000, it's like your odds of dying or just the mortality rate and the overall health is drastically improved simply from having 10K steps a day. And that's not a ton of steps. I'd say if you were to just walk continuously, it's probably around 2 hours of walking totally. Now, that is obviously dispersed throughout your day, and you don't have to walk 2 hours continuously because you walk around. Now, I'm at a stationary job now. I'm at home. I don't need to walk. So I go for walks. And this is what I recommend people start with: one walk in the morning. Then from there, you do one walk in the morning and you do one walk in the afternoon. Then from there, you do one walk in the morning, one in the afternoon, one at night. And I don't care if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. All of them are going to be impactful because you're going to make a habit of doing something you don't have to with the lowest barrier to entry and high return on investment. Okay. So once people have done that, then I will go into strength training. Now, the advice I have for any beginners in this, or people who are just, again, just not used to training and currently don't have a plan routinely, is to go with a friend who already trains, or maybe they're also new and also having to confront this barrier of being afraid to go to the gym for the first time. Go with them to have accountability, to have them with you and support you, and get a trainer or some sort of program. It could be a boot camp, it could be anything that's going to create more kind of security in your mindset of going to the gym and knowing what you're doing. It is so important at the start to feel like you have to show up, or like you feel better about showing up with things that you're not comfortable with. because it's currently not a habit. It's currently not something you crave, and it's currently something you need a great amount of motivation for. And so that's a really important thing, to have support with a friend and or a trainer. And I recommend you have both realistically. And then sustainability is the next question there. So hopefully you got walking down routinely. And again, that could also be with a partner, or especially if you have a dog or something like that, have that routinely, have your strength training. I would say ideally at least 3 times a week, enough where there's a frequency where you can sustain it. But so everyone's a bit different. Some people need to dive into something. I would like to go 4 to 5 days a week to know that it's working, or I can only go once a week. I would kind of edge towards 2 to 3 if you want it to make an impact. But if it's once a week to start for the first month, that's what you guarantee yourself, that's fine. The biggest thing is knowing your minimum effective dose. But I believe that frequency over duration, meaning I would rather someone work out 10 minutes 3 days a week for like a month, rather than work out once a week, once a day, once a week for a month, because that frequency actually will have better muscle adaptations. You're going to actually make a habit mentally. And this is the biggest thing, mentally making time for yourself, mentally taking time for yourself to improve yourself. And that is the hardest thing. And this leads me to the next question that I just loved. How do I get out of the quote, I don't have time mindset? And that is a very, 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 very hard thing to get over. It is a very hard thing to get over. Remember what I said about motivation. And I don't really like it when people say that in these reels. People training, they're not motivated. They're not. Yes, they are. That is absolute bullshit. I am always motivated to go to the gym. I love the gym. I love heavy weights. I love pumps, but I wasn't at the start. The most important time for motivation is right at the start. It's right when you're getting going. And then you still need to lean into it when you really don't feel like you have motivation. That's when you need it even more. And so to find time is going to be super hard because you're not motivated for it. So this leads me to my next point, which is it's about finding time, not I don't have time. So I have this big thing about calendars, digital calendars versus written calendars, or using a calendar. I believe we are so privileged in having digital calendars. We, for once, can look at time in a different context. Mentally, you can imagine time, but you can't see it like visually. I see my exact day, how I can plan it out theoretically to a T if I wanted to. And that's what we used to do, what we do with written calendars. But the digital calendar can follow you anywhere on your phone, and it can talk to you. It can literally say, hey, it's time to go do this. Hey, you're 30 minutes from this. And it can send you reminders, and it can send you emails. It can invite other people to things. And if someone says, oh, but I prefer writing things down, and you're not actually showing up for those things, it's not working. Like we get really caught up in our old ways, and I think a digital calendar is like a completely underrated piece of technology that we need to utilize more often, especially when we say the words, I don't have time. I'm fine if someone says, I didn't find the time, meaning I didn't look at the calendar. I didn't try to make the time. But saying I don't have time is not fair to yourself, or really not fair to yourself, recognizing that that is a limitation that you're putting on yourself that isn't inherently true. So if you literally can't find the time because you've looked at a digital calendar, you planned everything out to a T, and there you couldn't find time, that's a hectic life. And I'll honestly say, okay, if you made all of those, then I will believe that's a true statement. But I don't think people find the time. So I recommend you get a digital calendar, and then you put absolutely anything in there that you can. I put in my lunch, I put in my workout, I put in just little things that I know I need to hold accountable to. And I actually always have them on repeat, and I adjust as the week comes up. It took me probably a year to develop this habit, and it was from my business coach. Shout out to Gavin McHale for this, because he finally looked at my calendar and he was just like, man, you got to hold yourself accountable to this. And I saw his, and his had everything in it. And I was so impressed. And then it was funny because then a year later, I had a client see my calendar. It's like, whoa, you have a lot in there. And I finally realized that, yeah, I had to make a habit of keeping myself accountable to all the little things that actually add up. And so start off by putting everything in there, and just make that promise to yourself that this is where I'm going to find the time. this here. And if you got to move it around, you got to move it around. But this is a really cool research that I remember hearing about. And I tell all my clients when they sign up, I tell them to put in their meal prep and their workouts, because there was and I believe this is in the habits, not the Power Habits, the Atomic Habits book, and three different groups for exercise. And two of the groups had just more of like information. So one group was like motivation and mindset, like getting them all fired up to go do training. And then the second group was all the health benefits of training and why you should want to do it for your health. And then the third group was just write down when and where you're going to do it. That's it. They're all given the same workouts. And it was only, I'm not kidding you, one workout a week. That's all it was. It was one workout a week. I was actually really surprised by this. And the mindset and motivation and the health benefits one were both actually around 29, 28% success rate with the groups. The group that simply had to write when and where was 90% successful. Like, really think about that. It is 3 times likely that you are going to show up when you don't have motivation and you're not even thinking about health benefits. You just made a promise to yourself. So that's just something that I'm really big on that. And then, accountability to see value is really important, because if you have a partner that you're doing things with, so when I say like accountability to find value, accountability at the start also helps that level of motivation. So accountability to a coach or to a friend. And what we need to find is you need to get over this hump of assumption. Like, I'm supposed to do this and I'll get X, Y, and Z. I'm supposed to do that, I'll get X, Y, and Z. And you don't believe it. You actually don't. You kind of do, but you really don't. It's like someone telling you anything right now. Imagine, like, I'll give you this. Think of a skill that you want to have. It could be learning the guitar or learning a language, something like that, right? If I told you, okay, you could spend 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and you could learn that skill significantly, like extremely well in 3 months. Could you do that? Like, you believe you could do that, right? Right. And imagine this skill is something that you're really interested in. Like, I use those descriptions, whatever skill you think you're really interested in learning, but you believe it, you're really interested in it, but you don't really believe it. You're not really going to execute it. The only time you're really going to execute it is when it's worked before. And so what I'm really big on understanding now from just trying to convince people of things is that you can't really convince them until they've experienced it. And I know that for myself. Like, you can't convince me of something fully until I've have accountability to be really uncomfortable with something and not feeling motivated, not believing it's going to work until I see the result. And so at the start, when you're trying to find time, accountability with the calendar is one thing, but also accountability with your friend or your coach, or something that just makes it, give it time to have that value. And usually it's about 3 months. The first month is going to be like, you're probably really more fired up for motivation at the start. It's like, I'm making this change, I'm going to do all these things, yada, yada, yada. And then the second month, that's when things start having hiccups. And then the third month, that's when it's like, all of the novelty is worn off. And so it's one of the two directions. There's obviously in between a spectrum of directions, but on one end, you could have given up entirely, or on the other end, this is where you start to see all the magic happen. And you see the greatest things, 3 to 4, like, you see definitive change. I'm not even going to say the greatest things. Usually that's a year later, but you see definitive change after about 90 days. So accountability with that calendar, and that's where you're going to want to find that time because you believe in the value better. So that's kind of how I would start out a beginner. And like, on top of that, let's also talk about nutrition, because someone asked a very great question. What things could a picky eater implement to start being healthy? You see, these are all flowing really well for, like, people in the starting point. That's why I really like these questions. And I gotta tell you, I was the pickiest eater I ever knew. So when I give you some advice on this, I am coming from having the worst nutritional habits. It is like ingrained and burned into my mind from doing a Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner at my auntie or uncle's, and the only food on my plate was meatballs, sweet and sour meatballs, fair bit of them because they're my favorite, bread. I don't even know if I had mashed potatoes because those made me feel uncomfortable. They're all mashed, and some turkey and cranberry sauce. No veggies, no nothing. A bun, like meat and a bun. That's it. And so I've now evolved where I'll eat anything, almost anything. Like I used to eat 2 to 3 salads a day routinely. Veggies, doesn't matter. Like I am far more expanded than I've ever been. My taste buds matured, as you can imagine. So the reason I'm saying this is because I've come from being a very picky eater. Now, I've also, and the individual who messaged me actually was a picky eater and worked with me. And so I'll give you the same blueprint that I use with him and myself. It's like just start. It's still really like the majority of your benefit in a diet is your protein and your meat. Like it's your baseline for a reason. And it's not just to build, necessarily building the muscle. It's also like there's also the collagen, there's the joint health, but there's also really important for satiety. It's important to have like that is kind of it's the meat of your food. Like if we're gonna try to stay away from snacking excessively, and that's why I'm not big on snacks, is because they end up being habitually untargeted food. It's just like more emotional eating. So that's why if we have structured meals around the protein, that's the structure. That's like the bare bones of it. The bones is the meat. And so then from there, you can add in all the other things that you need. So we start with the protein. You should structure it around 3 to 4 meals a day, whatever is more sustainable for you. And I even say just pick the meat. Like, okay, what meats do you like? And anyone can benefit from a protein shake. You find a protein shake you like, you find 2 to 3 or 4 different meats you like, start there. And then make sure that you know that. And on the top of that, because if you're a picky eater, you probably have a hard time with veggies, I immediately recommend a veggie green supplement. I used to be kind of here or there on veggie greens, like, do we really need them? But there's probably a lot of benefit to having that in you, especially if you're a picky eater. But even if you're not, there's just a lot of benefits to what these things have as far as antioxidant properties that meat itself won't actually be able to do for you. And so you get a lot of bang for your buck, and probably also great for food variety that the gut microbiome would actually benefit from. And so I think that is actually a great supplement. Now I've shifted my opinion since the carnivore year that I had. But meat, veggie greens to start. Okay. And then from there, track the meat. So once you've actually picked and you're consistently eating these meats and you're having your veggie greens, not veggie greens every day, you're eating other foods. Any other food habit you have, I'm fine with, because I want someone to pick one habit at a time that's new. So whatever you currently eat, keep eating plus enough meat. So you're going to want to track that meat now, or the protein source. And so are we getting near our body weight in protein? And once you have that habit down, that might take 2 to 3 weeks. I know people who it took months to get that down. And I've been eating my body weight in protein since I was like 18, 19 years old. So it's just not a hard habit for me, but it can be really hard. And people are generally uncomfortable with how much meat they can eat and be satiated. Like they're just not used to that. I'm like, that can't be right, especially if you're in a fat loss phase. And if you're in fat loss, you're expecting to not eat a lot of food. So that's an inherent problem that right away this helps. You're like, wait a minute, how is this supposed to help me lose weight? Well, that's the irony of a good calorie deficit. It's not as hard as you think it is. And then if you're not used to, let's say you're trying to build up, right? You're probably not used to being very full. So because you have people who are naturally leaner tend to have an aversion to wanting to be full. So again, the protein is just going to make you uncomfortable. So get that habit down, then track it. I recommend a scale. And then from there, I would add the carbs, or understand your carbs, because you're probably already eating your carbs. And remember, if it is a protein source that has fat in it, you don't need to add many more carbs other than vegetable sources, which we'll do last. But if there is, like, it's a lean protein, something like chicken breast, or something like I have round, a lean red meat, or white fish, then I would add like rice or brown rice, quinoa. I'm actually really encouraging more people to stay away from bread until just for a while. Like this is kind of an elimination process, and then to bring it back and to see if they have any actual aversion to it. So to slightly eliminate it for a time period, and if you bring it back in, you don't notice any digestive issues, keep it in there. But in the meantime, I try to get people to more whole-based foods as possible. So now we're at meat and carbs, and hopefully, more whole food sources of carbs. I mentioned fruit and more of the kind of cooked grains, rices, and quinoa, stuff like that. And then I would add micronutrients, and that's just going to be a guess and check. And one of the biggest things I think people don't realize when you're a picky eater is that you can cook your vegetables and they taste significantly better. Like I actually do hate raw vegetables. Carrots I like, but broccoli, cauliflower taste terrible to me. And other people say I like them raw, and so go with what you like. And even if you say I only like carrots as I was, and that's actually where this individual started, I'm like, then eat them every day. I don't care, just to get that habit. And then we started asking more questions. Okay, what else do you like? Well, what about this? He was like, yeah, add that in. Bell peppers, cooking bell peppers, they're sweet. Start putting them into things, and you're just gonna add it little by little. And so that's the best advice I have. But a lot of your benefits are going to come from the meat and knowing your carbs, and then it just takes time and effort. And honestly, don't be afraid to try new. I recommend sugar-free cooking sauces. They're actually quite good these days. So from there, there's also some issues with a novice or someone new getting into all this routine, especially in the diet. And this was the next question. Like I said, these are flowing really well. And the question was, how does someone schedule dates with a significant other on a lower calorie intake? And I love this because this is, like I say, we're hitting all these major points that are going to be issues when you're trying to change your behavior long term, and you got to consider your environment. Huge thing here, really big one. So when you have a significant other, the very first thing you got to do is communication. You got to say, hey, babe, I'm going on a diet. I want your support. This is what I'm trying to do. And you got to communicate with them there, and they should be supportive. And what I would really work on too, and like that could even just be like whether it's you and them together or going to their place and their parents. So this is an issue that I had to communicate with my girlfriend about her family, because her mom always wants to give me some delicious Filipino food. And if I'm counting my macros, I can't count those macros super easily. And so that was conveyed, and people understand it respectfully if you tell them ahead of time. And when you get to have that conversation, it makes it already easier because they should already be supporting it. Now, the next step there, I have a couple recommendations, is that you at least try once, actually routinely, I would recommend this when you're having a date with your significant other, is that you try to have a whole foods cooked meal together that is planned, that is, trackable macros and everything. And that could still be a treat meal. That could still be, like something I always do with my girls, like a steak potatoes night. Like it's not actually balanced macros, or sorry, it's not a calorie deficit, but I'm actually trying to do calorie maintenance. And I do that with whole foods. And it's nice because we cook it together and we have a nice dinner together, and it's still all of the things you kind of really want out of it, but it's actually going to be more in line with the eating habits that I'm trying to establish. And I would really recommend that. Now, that was the other major thing too, though, is making sure that you understand that maintenance calories once a week is a very healthy habit. I don't want to say cheat day, because a cheat day is, the word cheat I'm not a big fan of, because there's no rules to this game. And that also just kind of qualifies you saying I can do whatever I want. And technically you always can. But what the meals are really about is more of a treat. And I want to make sure we're establishing this language more appropriately. I believe that you should have maintenance calories once a week, maybe even twice a week. Now, that can be from whole food sources, and that could be all still really inherently nutrient dense foods. Like I say, nothing that is really that different from my meal plan. It's just more of it. And I highly recommend that's done once a week. Now, you can also do this with treat foods, as I mentioned, like the processed foods that just taste good. And that is something you can do with your significant other, having that as a planned part of the scheme. So I eat really healthy Monday to Friday, and then that Saturday I'm going out on a date. Well, I'm going to make sure that everything up to that point in that date, before that date, is on point with my calories, so that, okay, I'm going to eat a little bit more in this meal and I'm going to enjoy it, because that's what it's about. It's about enjoying this meal with my significant other. And it's a great time to have a meal like that, because if you're having that meal with that significant other, you're probably talking, you're probably socializing. So you're not just wolfing it down and watching TV. So it gets you out of old habits of eating by yourself in front of TV, distracted, and you enjoy the meal together. So you're just going to get more out of that experience. The other major kind of habits I would structure around that is preloading protein. So protein shake before, depending on what you end up choosing when you go out. Having a side salad when you do something too, because again, that's going to satiate you more. So those are a couple habits I also recommend when you're having those treat meals. And then just earlier in the day, not fasting all the way to that meal, but rather mitigating a few of the calories for the meal one or two, depending on whatever meal you're at. So a little bit of compensation, maybe about 100 to 200 calories in each other meal, so that that other meal has a little bit more room for error if you're not trying to pull out your calorie tracker in the moment, which can be, kind of awkward, challenging, and you don't really want to think about it. You want to think about being present. And like, unless I'm preparing for a bodybuilding show, I'm probably not going to track them. I'm just going to hedge my bets. And I'm going to actually try to pay attention to satiety. I'm going to try to pay attention to, is this the right amount? Does this look like the right amount of calories? And it's really hard to know. And I just am big on people learning that level of intuition to eat the right amount of calories when it's a processed food. And so that's going to take time and practice. So I do actually recommend people try to have these treat meals, paying attention to that part as well. Not just, hey, it's treat meal time. Let's eat absolutely everything on the menu and get super full. If anything, try to eat the right amount right before, like when you're like 80% full. That's when you're actually going to be even more full later, right? Okay, so from there, I have another great question here as far as, again, newbies and starting out. And this individual asked me, what's a piece of advice that I wish I had when I was younger? I'm just going to go on a quick side tangent that I wouldn't change anything about my life ever, because the people who are in my life, I would only have met if I went through this path. However, I will talk about the biggest mistake I made, and it was like not getting coached. But like, this isn't me just trying to sell me as a coach to you, is that it was the biggest mistake of my boxing career by far, because I think I was a much better boxer than I allowed myself to be. So I only allowed myself to learn for myself. And as a strength conditioning coach, and I beat my ass to the ground with the training I did. I have messed up shoulders, messed up hip, and I'm currently trying to work on my knee. And it's all my fault. It's my fault for not getting support when I needed support and thinking that I could figure it out. But I could figure out a lot more, and I would be a far more knowledgeable person if I had the willingness to invest in a coach and to have people show me an easier way. I had heard Jody Tay say this on a different podcast, and she had said quite simply, when I was younger and I was learning skills in sports, things got easier when a coach showed me. And I was like, wow, what is just an obvious statement? Like, and that's why I keep saying the word coach. Like, I don't care if it's a trainer, a nutritionist, physical therapist, anyone that's like has a profession or has more experience than you in a relevant task or skill that you want to develop is going to be better. It's just like, why not have someone show you a path you've never been down? And so by far, that is the biggest thing I wish I had learned or would tell a former version of myself. But again, I have this kind of butterfly effect mindset, and I wouldn't change my life at all, because now I'm here giving this message for you. And again, all the people in my life, I probably wouldn't have met if I didn't take the paths I did. But getting coached just makes things easier. Just why not ask someone who's been down the path, rather than making a whole bunch of wrong turns? And as I said, it completely ruined my longevity of my career in boxing, because I just kept getting hurt. And I certainly had the ambition. I certainly worked hard, but it just ended up hurting me more than helping me. And if I would have had some guidance on that, if I would have had a path that would have been just much more efficient for me, I could have done way better for what I was actually capable of, in my opinion. So from there, and this is another great lesson as far as what I've learned recently. Someone says, "What's been your biggest game changer in training in the past year?" Now, if question was over a year ago, it would be my LSMO, last set max out mindset, and using the 5-3-1. But that was last year, and that's just that, do ramp up sets and don't try to hit absolute PRs all the time. You're just trying to look up the 5-3-1 by Jim Wedler if you really want to understand the simplicity of strength training and how many people don't know that. But that would be me last year. This year, it's walking. Ironically, it's not what you would think it is. It's how easy walking can fit into your life and how you can create these habits. And that's kind of training in fat loss training and sustainability, and how much more I enjoy it. Because I can fit it anywhere. So I can go for a walk to the grocery store. I can go for a walk with my girlfriend, with dogs. I can fit that into my life in any way, and I don't have to have the standard cardio that I was always kind of believing I needed. And just understanding metabolism, that walking itself is one of the most impactful things that people don't recognize. Outside of just strength training enough, the most impactful thing that you can do with your metabolism, because your metabolism is just your behaviors throughout a day, is walking. And so if you have a standard, as I mentioned, walking morning, noon, and night, if you have a sedentary life, but if you already have an active life and have an active job, you're walking all day. So walking is such an important thing. It's your NEAT component to your metabolism, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and fit it in any way you can. I call it an active mindset, right? Because I'm going to park farther in the grocery store. I'm going to encourage walking around the grocery store. I'm going to walk from here to there because I enjoy walking and it's impactful to my health and my metabolism. So that was a big one. Next question is it true if you don't use it, you lose it in terms of speed and explosiveness? Yes and no. So I want to say that the reason why there's a no factor is that when you think about movement patterns, you have an efficiency, and this is kind of that mind to muscle connection, because you get better at a squat, hinge, push, pull, because your body gets better at coordinating them. And I can tell you a prime example from my experience is burpees for me, and boxing, certainly boxing. Boxing is a better example. My boxing coach, Ryan Savage, doesn't train at all. He says he's getting better here and there, but if you watch him in the ring, he just moves around so easy, so effortless, but he's doing all this stuff for muscle memory, right? And I'm similar. I can step in with someone. I had sparred one of my guys who ended up actually fighting at a tournament recently, and I could hold my own. Not super long rounds and some good rests, but I can hold my own without doing any of that kind of training because of efficiency. And then as far as burpees, is the reason why I say that is because I can still bust out more burpees than most people because of how much efficiency I have in that movement. And it's a very powerful movement, but my body's good at coordinating it. Now, the yes factor is true as far as speed and explosiveness. Yes. From where your standard is. Okay. So just understand that you could still have speed and explosiveness relative to other people. As I mentioned with burpees, I do much better than most people because of how many burpees I've done. Speed and explosiveness in boxing, I can be a lot faster and quicker because speed in a sport is more of there's a cognitive component to it, right? How fast can I be relative to you because I'm making a decision quicker. So, but as far as just your raw speed and explosiveness, yes, that is a true statement, because it's a very difficult thing to keep heavy motor neurons. So heavy motor neurons is just, we try to classify, or science classifies the understanding what's going on with the physiology as far as your muscles, and based on what is being innervated by your mind with your nervous system. And those heavy motor neurons don't big heavy muscle isn't really easy to keep around because it's not very costly, right? It's not very efficient. And if you don't use it, you can inherently lose it. And what tends to happen as we get older is we lose speed and power. But there's also a baseline that you're probably going to sustain, right? And so you don't really need to worry about it. Like, you're not going to be necessarily peak speed and efficiency, and it'll be hard to compare to yourself in when you're like 60 or 70. That's when I would be really worried about it. But if you're more, in your 20s to 40s, you're not going to lose such a substantial amount. I think later 40s into 50s is where you're likely going to see that decline, but depending on where your joint health and everything else is. But you're going to keep a baseline as long as you're training. You're going to keep a baseline that will be more superior than most people who haven't done that training easily. And again, I'll go back to like the boxing example, and that's going to apply to your sprinting. That's going to apply to your sports. As long as you have, and what even goes back to like the example of Ryan Savage, how he can still move the ring and all this, because he still does it like at least once a week here and there. And he still does turn on that system. Now, if he were to be sedentary, didn't go to the gym at all, if I didn't do burpees at all, if I didn't do any high intensity training at all, you're probably going to lose it. Yes, no, I think that's very fair to say, because and this is what people don't understand about like the fairness and adaptation. People say, "Oh man, it's so unfair. You lose all this progress when you don't do anything." Well, here's the great thing to note. The only reason you get it is because it adapts. So if it were to not adapt to you being sedentary, it wouldn't adapt to you being trained, right? So that's a fairness if you really think about it. If you don't use it, you lose it. But if you do it, you gain it. That's as fair as it gets. So you don't need to do as much as you think. And I haven't seen any research as far as what it requires, but consider it very relevant to muscle building. It would be any other muscle stimulation, would be quite similar. Once a week, maybe a handful of sets near failure per week, right? And so just giving yourself a reason to sustain your power and speed explosiveness, just making sure that you're sprinkling that in your training with some plyometrics, and remember that it's more about the frequency over duration. So maybe you just do a plyometric with each of your major lifts. It will be a really good system to fit it in there. Hopefully that answered your question to some degree. Someone asked me about a funny workout experience. I'm certain I have a lot of other ones being in the gym for a while, but I can tell you about one that came to mind a little bit quicker. And this is a good recommendation, and why I don't think you should worry about spots too much on bench press. I don't believe in spotting on like requiring a spotter on bench press unless you're doing a test that should only happen every quarter, every 3 or 4 months. For the most part, know you can do your heavy weights. Just know it and leave a rep in the tank. Because, if you're going all the way to the point where you need a spot, the odds are your form has broken down. You're not that good at form yet, and you're going to hurt yourself. You're more likely to hurt yourself. Any case, a friend and I are in the gym, and I'm doing a boxing workout. So I'm hitting the bag, getting a bunch of good sweat, and he's doing a chest workout. So he's getting his pump on, and he's like, "Hey man, I need a spot." And I'm drenched in sweat. I think you can see where this is going. And I don't know what area of my body this dropped from. I think it was my face, but it might not have been. It might have been from my shorts. And it got in his face when he was doing some heavy, heavy weight. And I don't know if it got in his mouth or somewhere on his face. But so if you're looking for a spotter, also don't ask the sweatiest guy in the gym as well. So that is a funny workout experience I can tell you about. Another really fun one here. What superhero would you be and why? So, I mean, my instinct was to say Superman, but I don't like his outfit, to be quite honest. I think it's too flashy, corny, and Batman, I think, has so much more character because he's not actually like, he has no superpowers. He's just super, super, super into it. However, I think he's probably a very depressed individual. So I want to say Batman because he's the most badass, but I also think he has some deep psychological issues. Now, ironically, so I'm going to say Batman or the Hulk. So there's an irony there because of how intense the Hulk is. But like the main guy, I forget his name, Bruce, Bruce something. Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner. I don't think he remembers a lot of what Hulk does. So Hulk gets all angry. He just, he messes everyone up. Like you don't see Hulk lose too many fights. And Bruce Banner is just like, oh man, that was a trip. And I think he's like generally and certainly nervous about like letting it out and all that stuff. But I think the Hulk would actually be pretty cool. Yeah, because like not too many people can handle him, and again, you're probably dealing with less psychological impact like Batman would have, and I think he needs a counselor. So that's my answer there. A few more questions here. Uh, this one's actually a really good one, and I don't have a distinct answer as far as like I don't have all the knowledge on essential aminos, but I'm going to give you my best one because this is a very highly debated realm. So are essential amino acids better than branched chain amino acids? Okay, let's explain branched chain amino acids, plain or just amino acids first, and we're going to break this down. So there are amino acids that will make up protein, okay? And that's what a lot of people look at. Now, there's other reasons for amino acids, and I talk about this all the time because your neurotransmitters, which affect your mood, acetylcholine, dopamine, epinephrine, all those things are made from amino acids. And so there's more to the picture other than just building muscle, in my opinion. So that's why I think we should have at least our body weight in protein, if not more, because of more than just muscle building reasons. So I do think amino acids are like so critical. They're like, I've heard actually a protein researcher had said, kind of like how carbs have vitamins and minerals, that's what amino acids are like for the body in a different way. Now, what makes essential amino acids essential is that there's all the different amino acids that we can use. I think there's 22, if I remember correctly. There are 8 or 9. I've seen this be debated, what is essential and not essential, but it's around 8 or 9 that are not made by the body. Okay. When we use the term in nutrition essential, it's because you need to get it by consuming it. So that's why there's essential fats, and that's why there's essential aminos, because it's essential. It's important that you get these things because you can't make it. And you can't make certain fats, you can't make certain amino acids. You can make carbs. So carbs will never be essential. But I'm not telling people not to have carbs. It's just an interesting note that carbs can be created, but you can't make certain things. So that's what makes them essential. And a lot of these essential aminos tend to come from more animal-based rather than plant-based. And that is the biggest limitation to a lot of plant-based proteins, is because the plant-based proteins are caught up within the plant fiber. So they're not very bioavailable, meaning the body can't take it out of there very easily. So you only get like maybe 50%. Sometimes something like soy or pea protein, you can get more, closer to 70 to 80. But then it's an incomplete protein because it doesn't have all the essentials. Now, this is, again, and that's why animal-based would be easier to get all the essentials. Now, branched chain amino acids are leucine, isoleucine, and valine. They are essential amino acids. So now we're going even deeper into the specific 3 that are structured in a certain way that actually can skip the regular digestion process, and they don't have to go right into the liver in order to be dispersed. And it'll kind of go into the digestive tract much quicker through, I think, through the small intestine, maybe even through the stomach, but it's a quicker digestive process. And what's very significant about leucine, because I said leucine, isoleucine, and valine, leucine is the biggest kind of rate limiting factor for muscle building. And that's where branched chain amino acids got all of the hype over years. It's like they realized, hey, wait, this leucine here, this helps us build. So we better have more of this. This is what we need. This is the key. So why don't we have this more often? And over the years, it's just been fascinating that branched chain amino acids have been just sought after as being the most important thing. Typical people, you'll see it in the gym. They'll have it before, during, or after, before or during usually. And I actually still have essential amino acids. I did BCAAs for a very long time. And then when I knew essential amino acids came out, and That was because I had actually read someone mentioning that, it's just a little bit more beneficial. And this is really the way I made my call, is that there's just more aminos in it. That's all I can really tell you. I don't think that I'll tell you this. It doesn't impact muscle building if you're having sufficient protein throughout the day. So if you're eating near your body weight, or let's say 0.6 per body pound of body weight in a day, okay, you're eating sufficient protein throughout the day. This is probably not impacting you superiorly. It's not such a huge anabolic stimulus at this point, because you're probably getting that. If you're dispersing your 3 to 4 meals throughout a day, you're going to get the best bang for your buck, and especially if it's animal based. Now, if you are plant-based, this is where essential aminos and or I would say probably even just the plant-based, or sorry, even just the BCAAs will help you with that, making those proteins more complete. So the thing that I actually always started to recognize with amino acids is, like, once this start coming out, maybe it's not helping you, maybe, and then it's not getting closer and closer, it's not really helping you that much. The one thing I did read that it probably could help is DOMS, or preventing as much DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And so again, you might think that's good. And now recently, very recent, and this is where I'm going to say, I'm going to go on a lot of conjecture. I'm going to go on a lot of assumption-based things here, that it might not be good in helping. It might actually decrease the amount of hypertrophy signaling that you're allowing if you're going to reduce the soreness, because you might be reducing some anabolic stimulus, or sorry, rather more the catabolic, which is the breakdown stimulus that you want. So if you have branched chain amino acids during your workout, you might actually be reducing what you want broken down in order to have it built up better later. So you might be reducing it, and that I'll quote that from Thibodeau. I didn't see the research, but he's a very, very well experienced OG of strength training. And he had actually said that possibly branched chain amino acids are not helping you. However, he did say if you have leucine by itself, just leucine, as I mentioned, that's the biggest rate limiting factor, that may be beneficial. And I got to look more into this, but this is what I'm going to come back to, what I understand and what I use it for. I take essential aminos just to increase my total amino acid content, because if I'm going to have a supplement, why not have more aminos? Because they can do more than just muscle building. And I actually take essential aminos or branched chain, either of them, for satiety. It's just to actually make me feel full when I go to work out. And this is where I actually shifted over. Someone said, if you're intermittent fasting or doing a fasted workout, that might actually be more beneficial. But the complete protein is what matters, right? If you just have the complete, that's what's actually going to build it, because you can't build that much. You can't build the muscle if it's just essential aminos. It's still not a complete protein. So hopefully I didn't bounce around too much there. But the main thing here is that if you're eating your body weight in protein, you're probably getting the best anabolic stim, and you distribute that protein 3 to 5 meals throughout the day, 4 or 5 hours apart. You're getting your best muscle building stimulus from the protein and those amino acids. If you consume essential amino acids or branching amino acids, it may not actually be helping you build more muscle. But I do believe that I have a good experience, just conjecture, anecdotal, that because I work out fasted all the time, or if I want to stave off cravings, maybe at night, I'll have a little amino acid drink, and I don't think about food as much. It dissipates. And I'm not even sure if that's the amino acids or if that's just the sucralose, the sweetener in it. It honestly could be. So that's all I'll tell you I know about it. And as I mentioned, that there might be more research coming out that it could even be detrimental for hypertrophy building. This is all ever-changing research, and we're always finding out new things. And I try to be as transparent as I can. Do I think most people need it? No, absolutely not. If you enjoy it, and personally, I enjoy it because then I don't think about food all morning. I fast all morning. I go to work out, and then I don't feel like I need food when I go to do that workout. I'm not saying I get the best performance, but I get enough of a performance that I need. and I can do my windowed eating the way I want to. So that's why I enjoy it. So take note. The best recommendation I can say is like, you're probably not building more muscle, but if you enjoy, like, does it help you with satiety? Do you notice you're less sore? And what's more beneficial? Like, if you're trying to get hypertrophy, you actually want that stimulus, and maybe try the leucine supplement. So that's the best I can summarize. Is I personally even got to do more research on this, and I think there's just always new research coming out. So it's more to look into. Hopefully, I answered that the best of my ability. A couple more here. This was actually interesting question because they had asked about digestion issues that they were having, and how to manage something on a high protein diet. And people are always worried about high fiber or getting bogged up and stuff. And I'm actually on a pretty close to a carnivore diet right now. And the biggest impact that I made that I think works better in fiber, in my opinion, anecdotal, just but meaning it's just my proof, and what's worked for me better than ever is magnesium citrate. Like, if you don't take a magnesium supplement, but more specifically, take magnesium citrate, and take magnesium citrate each meal. So if you have 3 or 4 meals, take one little capsule, magnesium citrate every single meal. I have never had more consistent, like, effortless, like, bowel movements. And so it's like, it's been really good. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. But that's all I'll say without, knowing anything more about your problem and the details, because that only solves so much. But on a high protein diet, I would highly recommend it. And magnesium tends to be lacking in a lot of people's diets. And then I had a wonderful question here about sumo deadlifts. And the person asking this question asked me this because he always likes to rag on me about how he does conventional and I do sumo. I do both, actually. But here's the simplest answer for that. There are no rules against it. So sumo deadlift, so you understand that's a wide stance in a deadlift versus conventional, which is a narrow stance. There are no rules against it. But if you're going to go down that pipeline, then should we have narrow grip bench press and no wide grip? Because I know this person has a very wide grip. So if you're going to use that, you better use that same methodology on your bench press and say, well, it doesn't count unless you have your arms in this position as well. Or if you move the weight, you move the weight. If you can get a lift, you got a lift. If you can bench press it off your chest and it's a wide grip, there's no rules against it. And until the rules change, if the weight moves, the weight moves. It is that simple. And remember, you can do a sumo deadlift too. You're just choosing not to. So it's as fair as it gets. So I do believe sumo deadlift should be allowed in competition unless they decide that they want to change bench press as well. And maybe that's the something we come to. And I think that would actually make sense. You actually have a standardization based on a person's like shoulder width and the hip width, and that could kind of make sense. But that's why it's messy, right? Because nothing's going to be fair in this. Limbs and length and stuff like that is all inherently different from each individual. My shoulders to your shoulders, the way that you move weight relative to gravity and the torque, it's always going to be unfair. It's just always going to be unfair. I know this individual is taller than me. So when they do conventional deadlift and I do conventional, let's say we both do conventional, I am still moving less force because of the torque on your body. There's no question. So it's not fair. There's just no fairness in this. It's body weight relative. I'm short of the ground. That's just the way it is. So you get in these nuanced details, what's fair and not fair. And I just don't think it's worth the question. So that was fun. Had a lot of questions there, had a lot of relevant ones for the newbies. And so I really enjoyed this. Stock up more questions when you check it out on my on my Instagram, RQ Training Nutrition, and send me questions at any point because I love answering these. And I think this was a really valuable episode for people who are really new into training and or maybe someone new in training, you want to send this to them, you want to give them some advice, get them on the right track. And I think this stuff can really help. The simplest approach is what really helps a lot of people. And I always try to give kind of conjecture and context to some of the other stuff that is just more my ideas because my experience, but I am limited to my own experience. So it's not a perfect answer, but it is the best of my knowledge to this point. And I also don't mind doing research on more stuff. I didn't get a chance to research the BCA stuff because there's a lot of debate in this realm, but that is the most current research understanding that I've come across so far. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. I hope you learned a lot, and remember to share this, like, subscribe, do all the good stuff, and we'll have more guests coming up here, and I'll do another solo podcast in about 4 or 5 episodes. So stock up some more questions for me, even if you have like a big topic you want me to tackle, and I'd be happy to do that. So thanks so much for joining. And always remember, my friend, it is not about the pursuit of happiness. It's about the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.